So hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we have brought you another interesting topic, and today we will focus on audit versus inspection. So if you are a CRA or a CRC, you already understand how critical these two terms audit and inspection are and how they play a very important role in our field. And if you are just starting your career in clinical research, then let me tell you these two terms should immediately put you on high alert. In today's video, we are going to deep dive into key differences between audit and inspection. We'll talk about what makes them distinct, why are they so important, and how to understand these concepts that can literally shape your career in clinical research moving forward. So make sure you watch this video till the end to really understand the nuances between these two terms, because in clinical research, knowing the difference between an audit and inspection is not just important, but it is career defining. And this video will help you not only in terms of your knowledge base, but this is the most commonly asked question during your interview, and it clearly demonstrates your understanding of clinical research and various terminologies. So without further ado, let's get started. So now let us begin understanding the differences between audit and inspection. Now when it comes to key differences, there are 8 major type of differences between audit and inspection, and this, if clearly understood, would establish your understanding in clinical research. So let us start by understanding first and foremost what is the purpose of an audit or an inspection. So the purpose of an audit is to evaluate the compliance of the internal policies and procedures. Okay, so whenever an audit is declared at your site, the focus is on whether the clinical trial is being conducted according to the procedures or the policies that are laid by your site and the procedures defined in the protocol. Okay, so that is the main focus of an audit. But when it comes to inspection, the focus is totally shifted, and the focus is to assess the compliance with regulatory requirements. Okay, so the inspector would majorly focus on what are the regulatory requirements of that particular country, that can be US FDA or India CDSCO. So they would focus on the regulatory requirement and not necessarily on the site's policy and the protocol procedures. Okay, so that is the key difference between the process or the purpose of the audit and inspection. Second thing is who conducts an audit and who conducts the inspection. So the audit is conducted by the internal staff, that can be a company's quality assurance team, and most probably, to remain unbiased and neutral, the sponsor would give this responsibility of auditing a personnel of this particular site to a third party vendor also. So third party vendor on behalf of the sponsor would conduct an audit at your particular site. Okay, but when it comes to inspection, this is conducted by the regulatory authorities, that is the US FDA or CDSCO or Europe's EMA. Okay, so always remember that if an inspection is there at your site, then the inspectors would be government officials of that particular regulatory body. Okay, they are not internal site staff or not employed by the sponsor. Okay, and when it comes to auditor would always be an internal staff employed by the sponsor or the quality assurance team by the sponsor. Okay, so that is the second difference, that who conducts the audit. Third is the frequency. Okay, so when it comes to frequency, audits are regularly conducted in a particular study, and they are conducted on ad hoc basis also as per the requirements. Okay, so for example, if whenever I have worked on various trial during my career, the audit would be conducted yearly at least once on your site to ensure all the procedures and policies are followed. And there were also audits regularly conducted on sites where we observed large number of protocol deviations or large number of violations. Okay, so depending upon the need, the functioning of the site, the frequency of the audit can change. Okay, and the frequency of the audit also changed depending upon the sponsor and the performance of the site also. But when it comes to inspection, that is not the case. The inspection can be random, it is never scheduled. Okay, and they can directly visit at your particular site, or they can also inform you sometimes before conducting the audit. Okay, if it is a planned regulatory audit, then US FDA or CDSO definitely send you a letter way in advance, at least 30 days, to tell you that we are going to inspect at your site. Okay, but always remember, the inspection can also be surprised or scheduled randomly, and they can directly visit, because since they are concerned about the regulatory challenges that a site might have and the patient safety, then that is the case. But whenever it comes to audit, they have a regular set frequency and they do inform you very advancedly. Okay, so that is about the frequency. Now let us focus about the scope of the audit. Okay, so what does an audit look like? So the scope of the audit would be to focus on your internal process, that can be process of the site, okay, wherever the clinical trial is conducted, the process of the CRO which is conducting the clinical trial, that is the how the CRA is functioning on the site, what are the procedures, what are the follow-up letters, queries and action items. Okay, the scope of the audit would also be the quality systems. What are the quality systems deployed by the site? How are they functioning, and whether the output of the quality systems is being properly implemented or not. And finally, it would also test the adherence to internal SOPs. So each and every site, each and every CRO, and each and every sponsor would have a certain set of standard operating procedures. So whether those processes or procedures are properly followed, whether they are implemented, if there are any lapses, then what are those? So that is basically the focus of an audit. But when it comes to inspection, the focus is totally different. Here, the focus is based on the regulatory compliance, adherence to good clinical practices also. Okay, so whatever the regulations or laws are defined by the regulatory authority in that particular site, that particular jurisdiction, that particular country, then compliance to those particular regulatory laws would be the focus. And at the same time, the GCP guidelines, good clinical practice guidelines, which are the international gold standard guidelines for conducting clinical trials. Okay, so the adherence to GCP is also the focus of the inspection. Okay, so always remember, when it comes to purpose, the conduct, the frequency and the scope, you need to clearly know what is the difference between the audit and inspection and how do they differ from each other. Now let us see the rest of the four parameters. Now these are the last four parameters which define audit and inspection and separate them from each other. Now let us first understand by understanding the findings. Okay, so whenever it comes to audit, the findings may identify any issues related to internal policies and procedures. So if there are any lapses in the internal policies, if there are any lapses between internal procedures, then auditor may highlight that. Okay, so his focus would be that how are you complying to the procedures and the policies at a particular site. Okay, the protocol deviation to the related to the procedures, or the protocol deviations or violation related to the SOPs, whether there are any violations or not. But when it comes to inspection, the findings would majorly focus on the regulatory requirements. If there are any lapses in the regulatory requirement, or if there are any lapses in the GCP, okay, so they would focus on that particular aspect. Okay, so understand the findings would be very different between an auditor and an inspector. Okay, now let us understand the outcome. Okay, so the outcome of an audit is essentially defined in the internal reports, and whenever the report is prepared of a particular audit, they would define whatever the lapses between the procedures or policies at the particular site, and they would suggest the corrective action and preventive action plan, that is the kappa plan. Okay, so essentially the auditor would tell you what are the lapses at your site and how can this particular activity or procedures can be rectified. So they can be rectified through modification in the procedures, through training of the site, and they can also be rectified by amending the SOPs, site practices. Okay, so that would be the essentially how the outcome would look after an audit. But when it comes to inspection, the inspection is of a harsher nature. Okay, so if there is any inspection finding, then that would imply regulatory action and penalty at your site. It could also lead to warning letters, okay, like issuing 483s, and it could also lead to sanctioning your particular site. Okay, so after an audit, they would essentially focus on how to rectify those mistakes. But whenever it comes to regulatory non-compliance, and that is observed by an inspector, then that would have a very harsher consequences. Your site might also get blacklisted, or the site staff and the site functioning can be removed from that particular trial also. Okay, so whenever it comes to outcome of an audit or an inspection, then the gravity of it is very, very different. Okay. Now let us focus upon the documentation. So essentially, when it comes to audit, this particular audit report is essentially an internal documentation. Okay, because that audit is conducted by the sponsor or the QA authority, it is for their own particular use. Essentially, this particular audit report are never shared by a particular site. What they share is the CAPA plan, that is the corrective action plan, and what are the follow up that the CRA has to take, or the sponsor and the CRO has to take at that particular site. Okay, so that is how the documentation or the audit report would look like. But when it comes to inspection, the results would be declared officially. They can officially issue you 483, and that can affect the regulatory status of the trial, which means that the regulatory authority has the power to stop your trial in that particular country or that particular region also. Okay, so understand the gravity of the implication or ramification that an inspection report can have. Okay, last but not the least, what would be the follow up after the audit or an inspection? So when it comes to audit, the follow up would often be internally, where internally they would discuss with the CRO or the sponsor that what are the findings, observation, what is the CAPA action plan, how do we follow up that it would include the internal follow up and remediation method that can be applied to the site, so that the site is audit ready in the future or the inspection ready in the future. But when it comes to inspection, the follow-up would essentially be the regulatory enforcement of the action. If they have decided to give you 483, they would issue a 483, and if they want to keep you on the additional oversight, then the inspector would also issue you documentation or the follow-up a letter stating that you would be having additional oversight from the government, so that you can conduct the clinical trial accordingly. Okay, so the follow-up is also different. Essentially, when it comes to audit, the follow-up basically focus on how to improve your site performance, how to correct the protocol deviations, violations, or trainings and etc. But when it comes to inspection, there is no scope of improvement. They directly take action at your particular site, and they implement methods so that there is 100% compliance in the regulatory requirements. Okay, so please understand the focus between audit and inspection, and from now on, whenever you go to an interview and if they ask you the difference between audit and inspection, you have to be very, very clear. A lot of people would know only one or two major differences between audit and inspection, but if you explain all these eight differences, then it clearly states your understanding of clinical research, and it sets you apart in a significant way. Okay, so always ensure that you clearly understand what is an audit and an inspection. And whenever in future, if you get that email, no one likes that email, but if you get that email stating that there is an audit and inspection of your site, you are in a very good clarity to understand that how should I prepare according to it. You need to prepare to both the audit and inspection in a very, very thorough manner. But when it comes to inspection, you need to definitely inform each and every other immediately, because that can have very, very similar ramifications. Whenever it comes to audit, you are informing everyone, but whenever it comes to gravity of the situation, these two are starkly different. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Please make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that I can bring you such amazing content. And please share this video to your friends so that they can have such useful insight in their career moving forward.